Hey community, welcome back. And if this is your first time here, I'm Dr. Blaire, a doc in clinical psychology. And on this channel, we discuss psychology, inspiration, social justice, and all topics in between. First things first, hit that subscribe button. I need to see you back next week. And of course, stay tuned because for the last Wednesday of Mental Health Awareness Month, we will be discussing mental health from a generational perspective. And I have two lovely guests back again with me today, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for coming back. We are going to talk about mental health awareness again for the month, but specifically from a generational perspective. And we have professionals again here with me, Miss Lynita and Dr. Amber join me. I appreciate them tackling this conversation specifically because it's so much here. So I don't want just our professional perspective out here, but also our personal perspective because we're representing different generational groups. And we have alluded to in other conversations this month how generations and cycles and family systems and a society as a whole, we've already kind of dived into this. So I think it's right on time that we've kind of set the platform to lead up to this point. So with that being said, let's first talk about how mental health looked like from different generations during that time. So, if we were to rewind the clock and go back 40 years, 30 years, whatever the case may be, it may look different on how we looked at mental health versus how we do now. Like, it's been some growth.
Absolutely. Because back in the day, there was no mental health, right? Mm-hmm. You prayed about it and you kept it moving.
Right.
Moved on.
But now, luckily and thankfully, we have more people of color that are going into the field, right? Because mental health was an old white man's area, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah, and so now that we have more African Americans, more people of color that are, and women, right, that are going into the field that are there, because really a lot of times when you go into a room like that to share and to pour out your innermost secrets, right, and those thoughts that you haven't even uttered. Sometimes you haven't even uttered them, right? And you can go into a room and see someone that looks like you. That can be so very helpful.
Amazing.
And so nowadays you can actually do that. But back then in the 70s and 60s and 80s and even the 90s, there weren't a lot of people that looked like us.
And even generationally, 2020 alone changed the conversation about mental health. When the entire world had to go through like a mutual trauma, the conversation was affecting everyone. The same way that substance abuse is being treated more, because it's no longer just in the Black community, but it's starting to affect white suburbs.
That's so good. When you look at the pandemic was a hot mess, and in many ways we're still dealing with the residue of it, and some of us wonder, is it actually over? But I feel like we're all on our toes at this point. But when you look at how the pandemic kind of stopped everything and made us go through this collective experience or collective trauma for many, it is not only that we experienced it together, but when we look at it closely, actually it broke open a lot of conversations that were getting ready to bust anyways, because we went years and decades and centuries without actually discussing the needs around our mental health the way that we need to. And 2020 came and said, we're not dealing with that no more. No more. It's over.
And even I can remember being 12, and I might be a little bit too personal here, but that was my first bout of suicidal ideation. And no one knew how to address it. It was like, oh, you've always been a fat girl. You've always had that kind of stuff. So they weren't even equipped to deal with the trauma or the what I was going through at that time. And now about 10 years later, over 10 years, Jesus, the conversation, people were more equipped to deal with my crises because people are being educated and people are being more vulnerable. So you realize that you weren't going through this by yourself, and it's no longer, we're removing that stigma. And so the real thing that has changed over the generations, that stigma is no longer acceptable in most places.
I love that language. It's no longer acceptable versus, we're working to remove it or decrease it or eliminate it. Like, it's just not acceptable because it's not needed. It's not helpful at that.
At all.
At all. Goodness, like, could we just, take a moment right there? It's not helpful at all, y'all. We need to stop it. And the fact that every single human on this earth has dealt with mental health difficulties at some point in time, because that is part of the human experience.
Yes.
It's not seclusive. It's not just you. It's not just you.
No.
It's not just me. It's all of us. It is a collective. And that's something that I keep hearing ringing, the collective experience. And I think that actually that is where our power is as people. We have to be collectively together. So we're now doing better at having conversations. We are now starting to open this up a bit more. But I'm curious around, what are your thoughts about level of comfort?
I think our generation, like 25, 26, and maybe even 30, are more comfortable with talking about their mental health. Because we see it on television shows, books, people are talking about it, and it's no longer just associated with illness, but just our experience of being human. So I think our generation and Generation Z definitely are, help me, they're willing to talk about it.
That's good.
My mother, not so much.
We're all agreeing it's getting better, that some barriers have been broken, that generationally we have progressed. But I just want to throw out, everybody hold on to your chair real quick. I want to throw out that I want to give a round of applause first to Generation Z. Round of applause to you, right? But we have a tendency now, especially with social media, to just throw information out there. I'm feeling this right now, right in this moment, and we have not instead promoted a culture to process first, to get to a solution first. We have instead created this culture where we're just gonna throw out the problems, and unfortunately, this is negatively contributing to what we see turns into a toxic behavior.
Absolutely.
And it's harmful, y'all. It's harmful. So what was intended to be good, we have to take it a step further. So I want to instead, talk to my solutionist panel here. Let's talk about what are some solutions that we don't instead continue into this cycle of toxic behavior, of just throwing out these problems with nothing left. Is just triggering information all the time, and it's unsettled. So you feel a temporary relief that you've gotten it off your chest, that you've said it to somebody, but that's not actually the finished work. So what's the finished work? Like, how do we get here?
Community. And back to what I said in the previous episode, having a person that you can go to. So resources like a helpline, a place that you can text, or even using TikTok or Reels with a licensed professional who you can reach out to and asking your parent, can I go to therapy? Or can I go to a trusted friend, a mentor? Talk to someone who can put their hands on you, not just someone that you can connect via the screen.
Absolutely. And one thing that I would just like to mention is that a lot of the time, when we are responding to things that are out there, a lot of times we'll see responses that are for shock culture, right? And they go for the jugular, don't they? They're so harmful and hateful and painful. I mean, sometimes when I read posts and responses, I'm like, oh my God, because they hide behind this keyboard, and they don't realize, or maybe they do, that it's someone out there that has made that post. They're hurting, right? And so they're reaching out for someone, right? And so let's not be so harsh and so quick to respond so negatively. So let's try to be a positive light. And that's what I would say, that we should try to be a positive light wherever we can.
Yeah, it's this clickbait culture,
Oh my God,
and this cancellation culture. Like, that's just the thing right now. We need to let's dial it back, y'all. Bring it back. Like,
because we focus on the negatives, right? We'll look at a picture and then someone is talking about, oh, it's junky in the room, and they've taken a picture of their outfit, and but all the comments are about the junk in the room or whatever. I'm like, that is so mean, right?
It is, and actually taking a step further into that, I really am hoping that we get around to the point where we can curb behavior like that. But most importantly, with the youth, because we can't really stop how people think and how people feel. We can't stop that, but instead help people to have a higher level of empathy toward one another and compassion. And it happens in spouts, it happens in moments, especially when people are in pain. Like, I think people don't have an issue pulling on that, which shows me you got it. We just have to use it consistently. And so it makes me want to then help folks to get the point around how exactly can we not only shift that behavior, shift that thought pattern, shift that perspective, but most importantly, how do we get that ingrained into our hearts? Because I believe that When we do something temporarily, we get the concept, but when we do things consistently, that's coming from who you are.
Yes.
That's coming from the heart. So how can we get this to a point where that is who we are as a people?
Empathy is definitely a skill set. People think that you have to be born. It's a gift. And the same way that we have to work on communicating, it's a skill that you can acquire. That means that you have to practice it.
Absolutely.
So if your initial reaction when you see someone struggling is to be like, what's their problem? Or she crazy? Or it's when that is your initial reaction, you can change it like, I wonder what's wrong. It's a simple change of language, but you have to be very intentional and actually care and know what your bandwidth is. I don't think people automatically want to be mean or cruel or short-tempered, but if you have no bandwidth for yourself, it's hard for you to pour and accept someone else.
You cannot pour from an empty cup.
So it goes back to that mirror.
Absolutely.
I love that so much. So final thoughts before we end. I'm curious, what are some long-lasting thoughts that you want people to be thinking about? We can prompt for the next time that we come back. What are some other things that we can start thinking about and folks can start reflecting on outside of taking care of yourself, outside of making sure that you prioritize yourself so you can take care of others, outside of renewing your thoughts, outside of starting to look at our history? What are some other things that you want to throw out there to the viewers that they can be considering?
So for me, the one thing that I hang my hat on, and this is a scripture actually that I say daily with my family. We say, whoever's leaving the house at the time will say, this is the day the Lord has made. And the other person, instead of saying, let us rejoice and be glad in it, they'll say, I will rejoice and be glad in it. And that's because it's a choice. And so that's reminding you that, hey, I have the choice today. I can rejoice and be glad in it, or I can look at the issues that will arise because that's what happens, that's life, and I can be negative and sad about it. And so I encourage everyone to remember that you have the choice. If you've been given this gift, right, of the present, of today, right, which is a present, then you have a choice to rejoice and be glad in it or not. And so that's what I would encourage everyone.
I love
That is
that.
amazing. If I can say one thing, it would be intentional and be authentic.
Absolutely.
No matter what experiences that you're seeing, whether it's yourself or someone else going through, if you are intentional in the moment by being there, being present, and being intentional about what you say, and know that who you are affects someone else and who they are affects you, I think that the world can change. If we just learn to be in the moment, realize that we all can go back to that concrete, that we all every day have a handprint in someone else's life. Be intentional what you're leaving and realize what you're taking back with you. What's the residue of that concrete? What are you now holding on? And so just be authentic. So
I love that too, like, because we are the individuals that make up the community, right?
Right.
So if you change, I'm changing, we're all changing together.
Right.
And so lastly, I would leave with you all is that being sure that you're not only being authentic and that you are not only making a conscious choice, but first that you can be real with yourself. If you can look in the mirror and look at yourself and be completely honest, like that raw, honest truth, you are then giving yourself a clean slate to move forward and upward. And other thing is, you gotta be confident in yourself. If nobody is confident in you, you have to start with yourself.
Yes.
I can speak life into you all day long, but if you don't feel like you are feeling confident in yourself on your own, it doesn't translate in the same way. If you don't believe in yourself, somebody else believing in you, your perception is not actually receiving that information in the same way.
As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
Say it one more time.
As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
Where is that
Proverbs 23:7.
She just spoke the word. Receive it, y'all, because I just received it. Make sure that is in your heart. It's the benediction from me. I love that. Make sure that you are confident. And there are several ways. I might need to do this a video on this, so leave it in the comments if you're interested on how you can build your confidence for yourself within. Therefore, you can receive it externally. But have confidence in yourself and be the realist with you. You deserve honesty. You deserve honesty from you.
Yes.
Because if you can't give it to yourself, you can't receive it from somebody else, okay? All right? And I will be sure to make sure I include these ladies' information in the description box. I thank you so much, you all, for coming back, and I am expecting to see you next week.
Yes.
thank you.
like, comment, subscribe, and share. Share with your loved ones and your friends. And of course, remember to check out the description box. I will have not only my information, but information for you to stay in contact with Dr. Amber and also with Lynita Capler. And of course, remember before you go, and I see you next week for a new series. If I'm great and you're great, then we're a great community.